Hello and welcome to the Plant-Based Revolution podcast with your host, myself, Neil Damrell from My Lifestyle Coach. Thank you very much again for joining me this week and hope you've been enjoying the episode so far. And as I say, always love to hear your feedback and see how you're getting on with the show. If you're enjoying the show, you can get in touch with me on Instagram at My Lifestyle Coach or hit me up on Facebook at My Lifestyle Coach as well. And if you have a bit of time on your hands, I'd love to get you to do a little review, just to see how you're getting on with the show, whether you're enjoying the show, and a bit of feedback in terms of which was your best episode and what kind of episodes you would like to listen to more in the future. So today's episode, we're just going to get cracking into today's episode. It's going to be a short, brief episode today, but just talking about a simple guide to food labelling. So I think it's very important because there's a lot of mixed messages out there in the media and in advertising to try and get you to buy their products. So, these products, yes, there are more healthier options on the market these days, but ultimately these brands' main goal is to make money. So regardless of whether they're healthy or not, as long as they're making money, people are buying the product, they're going to be producing more of this product. So if that's a healthier food, generally, if we start buying healthier food, generally the price is going to come down because the demand is higher. Just as we've got these mass-produced foods, chocolate, etc., that are very, very cheap to buy just because the demand's high and the ingredients are very, very cheap to buy and produce. So that's why we see probably a bigger percentage of unhealthy foods in the market compared to healthier foods. But also the healthier foods out there, even though they market themselves as healthier, low in fat, etc., still might not be the best option for you. So today I just want to talk to you about how you can maybe be more conscious about the foods you're going to choose when going to the supermarket and how that can help you, maintain a healthy weight, lose weight, or just reduce your chances of heart disease, etc., by eating the right amount of foods. And you're going to feel better because you're eating the good food rather than just filling up on junk and processed foods. So like I mentioned, if you're on a diet, it's not always easy when reading the food labels because different panels, especially the nutritional panel on the back, can be different in certain ways, and they're very, very clever in marketing how much there is in terms of 100 ml within a product, but the product could be 300 ml. So then you've got to go and work out how much it is per serving or per product yourself. So an orange juice might be 300 ml, but they're advertising how much sugar is in the orange juice per 100 ml. So it does give a way to a lot of confusion. It's very clever for them because for you, on reflection, if you're not really looking into those food labels in more detail, you may think, oh, that's a healthy option, I'm going to choose that as opposed to something else. So you might think you're getting a healthier option that you're choosing, but in fact it could be healthier if you just took a bit more time to read the food labels. So hopefully this episode is going to help you better understand what the figures mean and help you just choose a bit more wisely when it comes to your food choices at your next supermarket shop. So what are the most foods, what foods provide the main information? So most food panels provide your nutritional information and your daily guidelines for the amount of food per nutrient that you should consume. So an example of the nutritional panel, for example, would be your typical food labelling. For example, if I just run through them with you, you'll have at the top the typical values per item. So if we're looking at a can here that I have in front of me that I'm just reading off ad hoc, is going to be a per can, which is half a can that's drained, or per 100 grams, okay? And then the next one you're going to have is going to be energy, and that's split into kilojoules in kilocalories. So you want to focus on the kilocalories because it's the calories that your body is going to consume. Kilojoules is another form of measuring your calorie intake, but generally in the Western world we focus on the kilocalories, which are a bit easier to manage because kilojoules are just a little bit higher in terms of the energy amount per item, so just focus on the calories. Then you have your protein, carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, when it gets to carbohydrates, they're generally split into two forms of carbohydrates. One, which will be your sugars, and then the second one, which will be your starches. So your sugars are generally your simple sugars. So if you're having chocolate, for example, all that added sugar, that's added in there, or even in orange juice, those simple sugars that are from the orange juice. And then the starch is going to be more your complex carbohydrates. So if you're having some brown rice, brown pasta, brown bread, how much of that is good starch. That generally is going to be really good for you. Going to have, contain more fibre if you're going for definitely the brown option as opposed to the white option. But it's not always going to be a bad thing when you look at the carbohydrates in general. A lot of people say they want to cut down on their carbohydrates, but in fact, it's probably just looking at cutting down on your simple sugars within the product rather than cutting down on your carbohydrates to a certain extent. Then you're going to go into your fats, and generally they just look at fats, and then of which will be your saturated fat. So they focus mainly on which will be your saturated fats, because saturated fats are going to be the fats that you want to reduce in your diet. It's the fats that lead to heart disease, diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all the lifestyle diseases that we're fighting against at the moment in the Western environment. So it's something just to keep an eye on in terms of the saturates on the food label as well. Then also you've got a couple more, which will be your fibre, salt and sodium. So fibre, really essential. We're not getting enough fibre in our diets on a daily basis. We want to be getting about 30 grams of fibre, and we're getting about 18 at the moment, so not a great deal. So focus on the fibre, and then your salt. So how much salt you should have a day, no more than 6 grams a day as well. And salt and sodium kind of quite similar, so they can be disguised between the two. So just focus on those and look at how much salt is in per product or per item. So these guidelines then just basically provide a daily amount that are provided on many food labels, which helps provide you with a guide in terms of, like I said, the number of calories and the amount of fat the average adult should eat per day. So on your daily guideline amounts, there's generally going to be your food labelling at the top here, the nutritional information from the food, and then your daily guidelines in terms of the amounts that male and female should consume. So when you look at these, then this is on per average of the adult, so this is taking into account your activity levels and your current weight as it is at the moment. So if you look at them, you'll see the daily guideline amount for average adults for women in calories is 2,000 calories. Amount of fat they should consume will be 70 grams, and the amount of salt 6 grams. And for men it should be 2,500 calories, 95 grams of fat, and again 6 grams of salt. So this is just, like I said, an average, and helps you kind of just give you an idea how much you should consume throughout your day, and so be more conscious of the calories and the fats within each product. So if you look at the general guidelines, this will help you to make wiser food choices, they hope anyway. And with extra help, this information will just give you a little bit more conscious thought when it comes to picking the right foods. So if I go through each one, like I've said before, I'm just going to talk on a few others in a bit more detail, especially when it comes to energy levels and fat, because I think that's the biggest things that we struggle with. And also just looking at a few health claims that you may get stuck on when it comes to buying a product, and in fact actually you're probably buying an unhealthy product because the food claims kind of pulled you in to buy that product. So like I mentioned energy levels. We've talked about fat. So they focus on saturated fats just because that's generally the unhealthiest fat. But you do have your polyunsaturates and your monounsaturated fats. these are on some of the products, not all products, but generally the healthier products, they may highlight the polyunsaturates and monounsaturated fats. Generally in nuts, if you look at any packet of nuts, because they're high in good fats, which are good for your cholesterol, which would be your poly and monounsaturated fats, they will highlight how much fat is made up of those fats, and you'll probably see there's very, very little saturated fat. So even though they're quite high in calories, nuts, so not good if you're consuming a whole packet of them, but definitely a better snack choice than it would be having a chocolate bar that is going to be very high in saturated fat, butter, etc., compared to the snacks of nuts, for example. So look at those in a bit more detail as well. Like I said, salt and sodium on the food label. Salt is sometimes often referred to as sodium, so don't be fooled by the smaller qualities, but because 1 gram of sodium is roughly the same as 2.5 grams of salt. So you may think, oh, there's very little salt in that because there's 1 gram of sodium, but actually that's nearly half your intake of salt per day when it's 6 grams. So just be a little bit more wiser when you're looking at the sodium and salt content. So how much is a lot or how much is a little? So food that we eat in large amounts, like ready meals, it's important to look at the amounts per serving. So for snacks and other foods you eat in smaller amounts, look at that per 100 grams. Okay, so generally if you're going to have some snack like nuts, as I said, maybe have a handful, which would be 50 to 100 grams. But the bigger quantities, if you're just going to have a quick, easy takeaway like a pizza or a ready meal on the weekend, then look at how much that is per item. If I just go through a little table that I have in front of me here, which gives you the roughly amount of quantities that you should look at for any food that meets or exceeds the amounts, whether they're a lot or a little. So a lot would be you want to be probably think again about choosing that product, and if you do choose that product, make that a very rare occurrence, so once a week maximum as a treat, maybe twice a month, for example. Where a little will be definitely the better option to go for, and consume more of those for sure. So a lot in a product, this is per 100 grams, will be 10 grams of sugar per 100 grams. In terms of fat, be more than 20 grams of fat per 100 grams. If you look at your saturated fats, more than 5, so 5 or more, for example. If you look at your fibre, then a lot will be 3. That's actually probably a good thing. So even though I said these others are quite a lot when it comes to saturated fats here, then fibre is something you do want to have more of. So having more fibre, more than 3 grams would be a good thing, definitely. If you look at your salt, 1.5 grams of salt is going to be a lot, and 0.6 grams of sodium is going to be a lot as well. So remember that the difference between salt and sodium pretty much the same, but just there's more sodium they'll be consuming. Maybe have more 0.6 grams of sodium, again like 2.5 grams, nearly, like I said, 1.5 grams of salt. So when it comes to little, so 100 grams, you would be looking at maybe 2 grams of sugar, 3 grams of fat, 1 gram of saturated fat, 0.5 grams of fibre, and 0.3 of sodium, 0.1 gram of 0.3 of salt, and 0.1 grams of sodium. So like I said, on these, the sugar, fat and saturates are something definitely want to have a little of, and the sodium and salt, and just limit and ignore obviously on the little the fibre element, because you want to have more fibre definitely in your diet. So that one you always want to have a lot of. The rest of them just kind of cut down on. So that is me just talking a bit about your food labelling in a bit more detail, something to watch out for sure. Just going to go through a few health claims that we all see in the media all the time, promoting something that is probably I mean, I've seen things recently that they say is healthy, which is generally is healthy. I mean, they were advertising chicken high in protein. These chicken snacks you can buy, it's high in protein, so you're going to buy that because it's high in protein. Well, the fact is, chicken on its own is just a good protein source, which you can go and buy from the supermarket anyway. So, protein, fat, low carb, all these mixed messages have been trying to brainwash you to buy these products, thinking you're having a healthier option. But ultimately, if you can understand food labeling a bit more, you don't have to be sucked into buying these products that are generally overpriced, and you can eat a lot healthier on a budget by not buying these packaged foods that claim all these things. When there's these snacky chicken things, you just buy a breast of chicken. You probably could buy 2 or 3 breasts of chicken for the same price of these snacky chicken things. So it's stupid. Okay, so if we look at health claims, so if we look at many foods, a lot of them claim to be low fat. For example, reduced sugar, we've heard many times, or 95% fat free. So it can be hard sometimes when you look at these to work out whether these foods are healthy for us. So in order to get to grips with this, we need to look at the jargon, and here is a quick guide. So low fat, this is probably the biggest one that we see a lot of the time. This indicates that the food has less than 3 grams of fat per 100 grams of the product. So some foods fit in this category, such as yogurts, many fruit and vegetables, bread, rice and pasta, for example. But it's always worth looking at the labelling and checking to see how much sugar is in the food claiming to be low fat. For example, some low fat yogurts are very, very high in sugar. So because they've removed all that fat, which is going to help you feel fuller for longer, they're going to replace it with sugar, which is just as bad, and actually the yogurt's not really that good for you. So I always go for full fat Greek yogurt. Don't go for any of the low fat stuff. You don't need as much of the yogurt to fill you up, and you're consuming less sugar. So definitely, go for the full fat stuff rather than the low fat stuff. And just because it's low fat doesn't mean you're going to lose fat. If you're still consuming too many calories than the body requires, you're still going to gain weight. So you could have loads of low fat yogurt and still not lose weight and think, why am I not losing weight? It's low fat. I'm not eating any fat. Fat doesn't make you fat. Calories. So focus on calories. Another one is low sugar. So low sugar indicates that the food has no more than 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams or per 100 ml of the food. So look at that in terms of the sugar within soft drinks. If you look at orange juices or any sweets, etc., that's something again to look at as well. No added sugar means there's no added sugar in the product. So this does not mean generally that this food or drink is going to be contain high natural sugars like fruit juice. They're not adding any more sweetness to it. So it's still something, fruit juice has been something on the market recently that we want to be cutting down on, definitely, because it's lacking in fibre. Apple juice, orange juice, better off having the apple or orange as a product itself. So just focus on cutting down on those sugars as well. But if you're picking it, say no added sugar, still going to have a lot of sugar, just probably more natural sugars. And next one, final one, is reduced fat. So this means that the product must contain 25% less fat than a similar or original product. So they might have rebranded. We've seen a lot more products out there now, especially with the sugar tax, rebranding themselves as new sugar. But you may have like a similar product, for example, that's the same, but they've just reduced the fat. So it's important to look at this. That still doesn't mean that the product is low fat, just means that they've reduced some of the fat. So think of like margarine, butter, mayonnaise. These standard versions generally are very high in fat, but a reduced version of these products would still have high amounts of fat. So think of those, and you can still enjoy those, but you just have a little bit less of them as well within your daily calorie allowance. 95% fat free sounds great also, but still means that there's 5% fat. Remember that 100 gram snack claims that 95% is fat free, 5 grams of fat. So they're still well out of your the low fat tolerance. So what would we say earlier? 5 grams of saturated fat is a lot, so it could be 5 grams of saturated fat even though it's 95% fat free. So can just be wary of that. So I think overall, to wrap up, the best advice is to see food labellings as they actually are. So it may seem confusing at first, but they do provide most of the information we need to make better food choices. But ultimately, the calories that you get from fat and sugar are the ones to watch. Okay, so next time you go to your weekly food shop, like I said before, don't be fooled by the food claims and always read the food labels. Okay, you'll be well on your way then to a healthier and more nutritious diet, because you're just taking that little bit more time to see what's in the product. We also have the traffic labelling system out in the UK, which a lot of companies now have adapted. Not all of the companies have. They do change in terms of what they use, which can provide a lot more information. So keep an eye on those, and remember to consciously shop rather than unconsciously shop. Just as you would if you're unconsciously eating too many calories, you may gain weight. So by consciously being conscious of the food choices you have when you go to the supermarket, and understand that you don't really need this, or you can maybe get a healthier option, it's definitely going to help you make better choices down the line, and you're going to feel a lot better for it in the future. So that's me wrapping up for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed that episode on my guide to food labelling. If you've got any questions regarding this, then I know there's a lot to take in regarding this topic. It's something that we're all still getting to grips with, really. And if you're quite new to looking at your ingredients, which we haven't gone into in terms of how they're structured on the food labelling, and you're still getting to grips with looking at what's on the back of your packets and understanding them, what they mean, then just get in touch. Hit me up on Instagram at my_lifestyle_coach, or just search Neil Damrell and you'll find me on there. And you can just send me a direct message if you've got any questions, and I'm happy to answer them for you and help you along your way on your health and fitness journey. And ultimately, if you're enjoying a plant-based diet, as we've talked before, don't have to count any, or don't have to look at any labelling, because you're consuming just natural, nature's goodness. Get the vegetables on your plate, can't go wrong, and you don't have to worry about looking at any food labellings, because you're eating good natural food. So you're not buying processed foods or packaged foods, which are generally going to be the worst things for you. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode today. Again, thank you very much for listening, taking your time out of your precious day to spend that with me, and we'll catch you next time.